Good evening, folks. Welcome to the service tonight. I'd like you to stand with me. Turn to hymn number 522, Anywhere with Jesus. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Anywhere he leads me in this world below. Anywhere without him dearest joys would fade. Anywhere with Jesus I am not afraid. Anywhere, fear I cannot know. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Anywhere with Jesus I am not alone. Other friends may fail me, he is still my own. Though his hand may lead me over dreary ways, anywhere with Jesus is a house of praise. Anywhere, fear I cannot know. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Anywhere with Jesus over land and sea, telling souls in darkness of salvation free. Bravely as he summons me to go or stay. Anywhere with Jesus when he points the way. Anywhere, fear I cannot know. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Anywhere with Jesus I can go to sleep. When the darkening shadows round about me creep, knowing I shall wake and never more to roam. Anywhere with Jesus will be home sweet home. Anywhere, fear I cannot know. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Brother Jesse, would you open us in a word of prayer? You may be seated. Quick review here. Sunday, summer revival starts off with evangelist Dan Knickerbocker. And each evening during the week, Monday through Wednesday, it'll be at 7 p.m. And Saturday, July the 13th, will be Operation Outreach. We're going to go ahead and do our prayer time now, as we did in the past week. And I got a pen this time, so I can write things down if you have a request. But let's review missionaries for this week. Mike and Hockey Adams, Kazakhstan. Kevin and Pam Barthel, Native Americans in Arizona. Andrew and Sarah Brown, South Korea. Matt and Nikki Brown in Cambodia. Dot Bradley, missionary widow. Simon and Brittany, Brazil in Australia. Many that are on the sick list that we've been over, and you have that before, so I'm not going to name every one of them, but you can read through that. Then the special request, we definitely need to pray about the election that's coming up, and that all of the election, not just the presidential. There's a lot of, Senate seats and congressional seats that need to be replaced as well. Also for salvation of lost co-workers and family members, for Gary and his travels, and Virginia, that she might have a healthy baby, unspoken request, Kathy's grandson Brody for salvation, Sadie for salvation, and Rachel's siblings salvation. And there's a thing about Virginia gambling legislation that would fail when that comes up for a vote. Dalton and his deployment, and John Carter. continue to pray for the pastor and his family. The pastor is away tonight in a meeting, and, will he be back tomorrow or Friday? Okay, that's great. And just continue to pray for the church, Lord. We'll meet the needs in the church, that, we'll see more people come in, and that we'll see some that'll come in and stay, not just visit. Also, pray for the work there at the Gardens of Virginia Beach as well. Do we have any prayer requests that we want to make? Yes? Oh, I'm sure it's something to do with this thing. Wasn't what we fed him the other day. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That could happen. Anybody else? Sadie? Okay, Hunter, under the weather. John gave him a departing gift, huh? Anybody else? Okay, I'm gonna ask Brother Toby if he'll pray for us. Okay, we're gonna be doing part 2 for the video we started last week. If you weren't here, well, it is available on YouTube, and I think if you look at the church page there on YouTube, there should be a link for it so that you can get to it if you need it. And this particular section I know is gonna talk a little bit, some of it's gonna cover Noah's Ark and why they think the Ark was correct, you know, and as far as size wise, and then they show some balancing things where these big stones that they found that they think belong to the Ark because of where they found the stones. Now, this is one thing that I've seen for 40 plus years, almost 50 years, that people keep saying, oh, we know where the Ark is, we know where the Ark is, we found the Ark, but they never have. They, you know, they keep saying they found it, and they'll say that Turkey won't let them in there to get to where they think it is, but I find that very hard to believe myself personally. You can believe what you want on that. It's just something they've said that they know where it's at, but the problem that I have is that salvation is by faith. They're not going to find the Ark, you know, because then you have sight, there's proof that proves the Bible was correct, and I just don't think that's going to happen. That's just my personal opinion, but you know, they don't say that they found the Ark in this, but they did find those what they call, I think they called them drag stones, you know, and that's very possible that that's what they were from, because why else would they have been where they found them? But the actual Ark, I don't think that's ever going to be revealed, at least not until, you know, the millennial reign, maybe. But personally, I think it was probably disassembled and used to build other stuff, you know. I would imagine, you know, it made good firewood, you know, after they got off of it. But I'm sure they had to build something, and they probably, you know, people, that's the way people are. They're gonna scavenge what is available. That's just the nature of people, you know. I mean, it's all through history where somebody built something and somebody else came in, took it apart and used it to do something else, you know. So you'll see that. Then they also mentioned something about a cover that went on the top of the Ark, and they say, well, this is the cover for the Ark. Well, when they listen to when they bang on it, it's not wood. You know, you'll see it. I think they're mistaken on that part. It's not. It was nothing to do with the Ark. I think it might have been a meteorite fragment because it's metallic, you know, and there's nothing that we can see biblically that it was metal, you know. Not that it couldn't have been, but we'll see. I'll let you look at it, make your own decision on that.
The events of Noah's, to their dismay, David Ralph agreed. He stated, well, we know we are now about 120 years after Darwin, and the knowledge of the fossil record has been greatly expanded. The record of evolution is still surprisingly jerky, and ironically, we have even fewer examples of evolutionary transitions than we had in Darwin's time. Just lining things up on a table and telling a story is probably fun, especially for kids, but that's not science. The Grand Canyon is a great example for anybody to look at because it was fractured open, perhaps by an earthquake, and we can now see the layers easily. There is virtually no erosion features between the layers when they are inspected. Also, you will notice layers have eroded flat. Flat is not how ecosystems exist. We find no fossils of death in pre-flood rock layers because no catastrophic event took place to preserve them. It's only when we get to the great unconformity that life is visible in the fossil record. We can see the flood layer when we look around the world. Here it is at the Grand Canyon. It is referred to as the Tapeats Sandstone. Here is a map where you can trace it across North America. So, what do the rock layers show? Ocean waters flooded over all the continents. Evidence for this is obvious in that there are marine fossils on the top of all mountains on Earth. There is widespread, rapidly deposited rock layers. These rock layers can be traced all the way across continents and between them. This is evidence of a worldwide global event, not random ecosystems buried over eons of time. Even museums today acknowledge that dinosaur graveyards, marine life, trees, and more were all buried quickly by a catastrophic water event. The fossil layers are 100% evidence of Noah's flood. Lake Titicaca rests at 12,500 feet above sea level today, and its fresh water have ocean aquatic life, such as seahorses alive in it today, which are only ever found in the ocean. So, this is more physical evidence, yet again, of remnants from the worldwide flood. We can test the age of a lake another way, using observable rates other than the assumption of slow continental uplift, by what we call residence time. That is, the time it takes for water to be flushed from the lake and replaced by new water. It's also called lake retention time. It is the measurement of the age of the water within the lake. For example, this figure is the result of dividing the lake volume by the flow in and out of the lake. It expresses the amount of time taken for a substance introduced into a lake flow and out of it again. In this case, salt. And for Lake Titicaca, the residence time is around 1,343 years. Not even close to millions of years that they assume and tell the public. The fact is, Lake Titicaca was raised from sea level during Noah's flood and was flooded with the ocean water during that time. The surrounding land attests to this, but more on that next. Evidence from this is that Lake Titicaca drains to the south along Altipolano tableland, spreading out over the Desaguadero and towards Lake Ubó, and from there into large salt flats, proving that Lake Titicaca was once ocean water, as these salt flats are the basin from which Lake Titicaca flows. If what I'm saying is true, that the flood waters pushed ocean water into Lake Titicaca, then its drainage of salt would be quite noticeable in the downstream of the current lake's outflow, which it is. It's all along the Altipolano to the south, where it is accumulated along the slightly sloping tableland, which drops 400 feet from Lake Titicaca. Although Altipolano and around Lake Ubó lies the Salar de Uyuni, where even more salt is found. The last 4,300 years since the flood, the lake has been draining and losing salt and exchanging it for fresh water from rain and new rivers flowing into it, leaving the lake today mostly fresh water. Salt content is nearly all gone, but yet some still remains, proving that the lake is young and not millions of years old. It's impossible. We creationists know that it was filled with seawater during the time of the flood, and pushed into its current position during the formation of the Andes because of two tests. One is of its drainage basins, which prove it was once completely salt water. Two, it has saltwater flora and fauna in and around the lake, with millions of fossil seashells on its shores. As you should know, water always finds the lowest recesses of ground and eventually settles. This lake is in a deep pit, which the water settled in after the flood receded. It's the only explanation that fits the evidence we see. And we also have evidence of a 1,000-year-old temple beneath the waters of the Lake Titicaca. An international group of archaeologists say that there is evidence of a temple 200 meters long and 50 meters wide, along with signs of a paved road. What other event deposits ocean water and aquatic life at 12,500 feet above sea level? You see, only theory evolution has for this. is that the land must have been lifted up from sea level very slowly over millions of years. But their rescuing device for this fails because this supposed continental uplift puts this occurrence before humans supposedly evolved. You see, the gradual process of plate tectonics is so slow for the ground to lift 12,500 feet from sea level, the numbers just don't add up. But wait, what about the seahorses? How can seahorses adapt so quickly to such a new environment right after the flood? The answer lies in their genes. They lack or lost many of the genes which would have caused them to die otherwise. This is why we don't see a lot more ocean life in that lake today. They were unable to adapt to the salt content changing to fresh water. Puma Punku is in Bolivia. It is a perfect example of an antediluvian structure that we can see today. At 13,000 feet elevation, it's a South American ruin that predates the Mayans. This massive structure, with its advanced stonework, was destroyed in a flood. First of all, for a flood to reach 13,000 feet elevation is pretty incredible. Next, for a flood to move these megaton blocks and bury them in over 8 feet of mud is even more astounding. As you can see, many blocks are still covered to this day. Who knows how much is hidden from sight. The flood was so powerful that it not only buried the city, but was able to break apart these stones, and some of them were moved, weighing 131 metric tons. Since no rivers flow into Lake Titicaca, which is the nearest water source to Pumapunku, the only explanation for the submerged ruins by scientists is that a major flood occurred that reached over 2 miles above sea level. Only a global flood could do this. So this site is unique on Earth because it proves two important things. Our antediluvian ancestors were advanced in building and technology, and that a global flood occurred. The gray stones that you're seeing in this picture are from 44 miles away. The weight of the huge foundation blocks, no one even knows. flood of Noah lines up with the evidence that we see in the world today. Scientific investigation has revealed over 1,800 oil well boreholes from 4 different continents have all been compiled and mapped. The newly emerging map tracks the thickness and extent of each rock type as they were laid down by the flood. This research reveals the same 6 megasequences of each sedimentary rock deposit across multiple continents. Each megasequence contains a huge stack of rock, often with coarse-grained sandstone on the bottom, then finer-grained deposits like shale, then topped by limestones. Each megasequence is bounded above and below by flat, eroded surfaces called unconformities. What has been discovered from both a creationist as well as from a secular understanding is that much of the continental fossil record was already in place before any of the present-day ocean crust had come into existence. For example, all of the trilobite fossils had been deposited. Plus, all of the older coal deposits had already been formed before any of the present-day ocean crust had formed. Since in creationist understanding, the presence of fossils is a completely trustworthy indicator of Noah's flood, this means that much of the flood damage had already unfolded and it generated fossil-bearing sediments on the continental surface before any of the present-day ocean floor had appeared. It further implies that all of today's ocean floor formed since the onset of the flood during roughly the latter half of the cataclysm. It also means that all of the pre-flood ocean floor plus the ocean floor formed during the earlier portion of the flood must have been recycled into the Earth's interior during the cataclysm. These considerations indicate in a compelling way that rapid plate tectonics must have been a major aspect of the year-long flood catastrophe. This 6 megasequence worldwide flooding process perfectly set the stage for the subsequent ice age and the creation of a completely new seafloor of hot lava as a consequence. This caused an abnormal amount of evaporation and thus continuous rain that was likely worldwide. The volcanic activity that created the Ring of Fire would have spewed volumes of ash and aerosols high into the atmosphere, keeping the now frozen Earth in an ice age for hundreds of years to come. And sure enough, the first megasequence's rocks show a spike in volcanic activity and massive amounts of carbon dioxide. At this point, the newly formed continents drifted with great speeds, impacting one another, forming the mountains that we see in the world today. And, for the first time ever, new megasequence maps allow us to see how Noah's flood shaped our entire planet, just like the Bible said, including reconfiguring the continents. The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat on the 7th month of the 17th day of the month, and we now have evidence for this as well. We have discovered 2 amazing things. At the base of Mount Ararat, they discovered many drog stones. These gigantic stones are strewn about as though they were cut from the ship as the water receded. They are almost in a straight line pattern over 8 miles approaching the mountains. What these are for is counterbalance for a ship during huge waves. When they discovered these, they wanted to actually put this to the test and see that if a ship which weighed as much and was shaped like the Ark, would it withstand massive tidal waves. The results showed perfect results that line up exactly with what we would expect if Noah's Ark was true.
as the ship would roll and pitch, this would swing back and forth and up a little bit as the ship would pitch and roll, similar to a shock absorber in your car. And it's slowing down that momentum that would be created from that. So quite amazing that Noah's Ark would use that kind of technology.
The next amazing find is they found the cover that Noah placed over the ark.
As far as we know, there's nothing else like this anywhere. Nobody's ever.
My goodness.
It's got crosses that are very faintly carved on it. You got a big one here. You got a small one right there. One here. You ever see? It looks like a little bit like pine bark.
It sounds like metal.
This isn't an anchor stone.
Oh, I see.
At one point it says, and Noah came out of the ark and he took the cover off, or he threw the cover off. This is a rather unique thing. It has the appearance and the texture of some kind of a bark.
That is a cross.
Right?
That is a cross.
There you go.
That is incredible.
It has a very hollow sound.
Very hollow. It sounds like metal.
Noah's flood represents the single most detailed event to ever take place in the Bible. The Apostle Peter and Jesus himself referred to the flood as an actual event. Remember, when things die on land, they get eaten or degrade rather fast. The odds of life dying to make the quantity of oil that we find on Earth today is best explained by the flood. It's also safe to say that the fossil record is not valid when we find evidence of discrepancies in the record. And guess what? We do. The upside-down geologic column in Pakistan is one such place. At the foot of the Karakoram Mountains in the Salt Range Formation, scientists have discovered fossilized plants and insects. From the evolutionary perspective, these remains belong to the upper part of the geological column. However, this formation lies beneath the Cambrian rock, which is dated back to over 400 million years. Discoveries such as these support the biblical version of the Earth's history, whereby the geological column is primarily a consequence of the global flood and its aftermath. It is no surprise that there is some order to the fossil record, such as sea creatures buried beneath land creatures, and mobile creatures such as birds near the top. But, since as the Salt Range Formation testifies, the ordered charts that adorn textbooks aren't always what they find in the field. Many results today have kicked evolution hard in the dirt. They have found complete stasis in the entire Pliocene era. We also know that the Ashley phosphate beds in North Carolina have found human bones and artifacts with dinosaurs together. Also remember that they also found modern-day birds dating back in the Cambrian rock layers which supposedly evolved from dinosaurs. It's a total mess. Also consider that many of the biggest dinosaurs, such as the long-necked sauropods like Brachiosaurus, Titanosaurus, and Apatosaurus, would have eaten colossal amounts of vegetation. So why do we not find such abundance of these plants in the rocks containing these dinosaur fossils? Take for example the Morrison Formation in Montana. Even though this formation had yielded many dinosaur fossils, they're very scarce in vegetation. This phenomenon of missing vegetation doesn't just apply to dinosaurs or their rock layers. The Coconino Sandstone in the Grand Canyon has many animal trackways, but it's almost devoid of plants. These rocks tell us something profound about Earth's history. They suggest that these deposits laid down are not ecosystems buried over eons of time. Otherwise, we'd find more evidence as plants that the animals ate. Instead, the evidence fits nicely with the biblical model of early Earth's history, whereas these animals were transported and buried catastrophically during Noah's flood. Geologists have assumed and say that calm weather conditions are required for these settling processes to occur to form mudstone. Therefore, whenever they encounter mud deposits, they interpret them as forming in tranquil water environments. However, recent research published in the prestigious Journal of Science has turned this argument on its head. The researchers showed that mud deposits form from rapidly flowing water. Yet again, evolutionary theory fails when put to the test, and we have more evidence for a global flood. Evolutionary geologists claim that the Grand Canyon is the best and most complete geologic column on Earth. In the Canadian Museum of Nature in Ontario, Canada, There displays a massive diagram of the entire Grand Canyon, layer by layer. Within it shows huge breaks in time. 480 million years are missing between the basement and the Precambrian rocks. 330 million years are missing between the Unkar Nankawik and the Chuar Formation. Somehow came and left without a trace, while the supergroup was supposed to have sat there for some 215 million years, during which time it was tilted. It was then cut by the Tapete Sandstone. That 215 million years also left not a shred of evidence. Right here it's expected that there was 155 million years of deposition of dirt which somehow all vanished without a trace of evidence of erosion. The remains of the Surprise Canyon Formation are supposed to represent 25 million years, again alleged to have eroded away while leaving behind no evidence. The top layer of Grand Canyon is claimed to be 270 million years old, and tourists now walk around on this layer. 270 million years of geological deposits have all been washed away. If we ignore Surprise Canyon Formation, we still have a total of 1,295,000,000 years of alleged geologic time that has gone missing. This all adds up to a staggering 81% of the geologic column, which is absent without a trace in what is described as surely the finest record of geological history anywhere on Earth. Rock layers were originally laid down horizontal, and in the case of the Grand Canyon supergroup, they were tilted. Then they were cut off by erosion, then more layers laid down on top of that, horizontally. The rock layers do not conform, as you can see in the picture. So they suggested, evolutionists, that millions of years of time between when the supergroup was cut and when the layers were deposited. But there is no evidence of this 215 million years. You can argue all you want, but where's the evidence? If all these rock layers were laid down over millions of years, then why is there mysteriously no sediments laid down during that 215 million years on top of the cut supergroup? That's a lot of years to leave no evidence. I mean, think about it just for a second. Scientific studies have shown that sediments and even dust particles accumulate at even as low as 1 millimeter per year. At that rate, in 215 million years, that would accumulate 215,000 meters. That's over 700,000 feet of dust, debris, and ecosystem remnants that should be visible. There is no accumulation of the sediments of the alleged 215 million years of time at the unconformity layer. It's not the sediments that are missing, it's the time that's missing. Those who argue in favor of deep time are arguing from an absence of evidence. This is the same problem which occurred with the moon. When they first went to the moon, they had expected to land in multiple feet of dust accumulation because they expected the moon to be very old according to their deep time belief. When they landed, there were only a few inches of dust, proving exactly the same thing we're looking at with the fossil record. Everything is young. The Earth, the moon, and so is the Grand Canyon. More problems. If you look at flow number 1 in the chart, called the Cordenas basalt, it was dated using rubidium strontium isochron at 1.07 billion years old. Well, the other lava flow on top of it, flow number 2 in the chart, they found Native American pottery from a tribe that lived in that region between 1,000 and 1,200 years ago. So they knew how old the lava was. But using the same dating method, the dates returned at 1.34 billion years old on lava that we know was only around 1,000 years old. Contrary to what mainstream science wants you to think and believe, the dating methods give vastly different answers on the exact same rocks tested. The Grand Canyon itself is far more of a depiction of Noah's flood than it is uniformitarianism millions of years. The Empire Mountain Thrust Fault, just south of Tucson, Arizona, has Permian rocks on top of Cretaceous. What's especially interesting here is that the Cretaceous limestone is actually marble. It has undergone heating and pressure. It has changed its state because of this, and it's called metamorphosis. The Permian rocks have not experienced this heat and pressure, so this would actually indicate that the Cretaceous rocks are older than the Permian rocks. It further indicates that this out-of-order sequence is genuine. There is no overthrust here. As Burdick and Slusher documented back in 1969, no slick and slides, the Permian rocks had never been heated, and the rocks are locked together in what Burdick describes as a gear mesh fit. The rocks on the bottom were gouged out and then filled in with upper rocks. Obviously, the rocks did not slide relative to each other. So the rescuing device was that the rocks slid very slowly, and that is why the rocks didn't heat up or melt. And people mention the San Andreas Fault in California as an example of this. Well, the San Andreas Fault is not an overthrust. It is rocks that are sliding beside each other. So again, the gear mesh interlocking of the layers show that there was no movement between the layers. They're locked together. And this is secular scientists that agree to this. This isn't some creationist propaganda. These are not overthrust. They again are genuine sequences of reversals of the evolutionary timescale. Regardless, there are far more problems with the geologic column around the world. What I have presented to you are examples after examples and evidence after evidence that there are layers that are out of sequence and order, evolutionary speaking, that there are hundreds of these in North America alone. And even if there was just one of these, it would invalidate the geologic column and ultimately evolutionary theory. And because there are far more than just one, it also invalidates the geologic history of Earth, because these are supposed to be sequences of time. And if these are not sequences of time, they cannot use these for evidence of time. So in conclusion, these are not thrust faults. They are invalidations of the fictitious geologic column and deep time. I am astonished by the secular camp and the atheist who can see this evidence for themselves and deny it, and then get mad at us for showing them that they were lied to, and then they take the liar's side, defending them. It is complete insanity. But let's move on, I digress. Here's the most recent refinement. I love this, by the way. The Geological Society of America has claimed to be able to date parts of the scale with an accuracy of 0.05% accuracy. With such horrible precision, you shouldn't even question why they get dates wrong so often. Everything they feed the public is for the story they want to wield. They have no evidence. They make it up as they go along. There were at least 6 different skeletons found on the island of Guadeloupe in the 1800s. These skeletons were of completely modern human beings found in rocks dated 25 million years old, according to evolution. Yet according to evolutionary theory, humans haven't been around for at least 100 to 200,000 years. So now you probably know why these skeletons are not on display. One of them was on display at the British Museum of Natural History for over 50 years. That was until evolutionary theory took hold. In total, they excavated over 30,000 different bones and remains from that rock layer, which is dated at around 25 million years old. And like all evidence that comes out against evolutionary theory, it's buried in the basement of a museum to never be seen or heard from again. Are we to believe that the high Arctic had an animal diversity as diverse as the Serengeti, yet was covered in ice and snow and going through an ice age? This is completely ridiculous. In 1924, the Doheny Scientific Expedition ventured into the Havasu Canyon region of the Grand Canyon. The expedition report, penned by Samuel Hubbard, is a short but fascinating read. Now, this short expedition brought multiple enigmas to the attention of the scientific community. One discovery of fossil footprints was only briefly mentioned in the report, saying that Mr. Gilmore was at a loss to explain these carboniferous footprints. That Mr. Gilmore was Charles W. Gilmore, who gave more detail in the Smithsonian Miscellaneous Collections. Mr. Gilmore showed the footprints which bore a clear resemblance of horse footprints to the local Native Americans to see what they would say about them. The local Native Indians considered them to be the tracks of a band of wild horses. Now I want you to remember, Indians were natural trackers, and they could well identify any animal by its footprints, as their hunt depended on it. I would think they know what a horse footprint looked like, especially considering the fact that they owned and rode horses daily at this point. But the problem for evolutionism was that these footprints were out of place. They were in Permian rocks. The rocks were far too old, according to evolutionary theory. After all, many people still believe in the evolution of the horse. Although the sequence has been proven wrong years ago, it still appears in textbooks today, so I'm sure many listening still believe in this lie. But regardless, if you actually look at the charts, the first supposed ancestor of the horse supposedly had arisen 50 million years ago. But now these fossil footprints in the Grand Canyon, identical to those of modern-day horses, were in rocks that have been dated by evolutionists pushing 300 million years. Not only does this totally debunk horse evolution, but it puts modern horse way down at the bottom of the geologic timescale. Mr. Gilmore did the only thing he could have done, which was attempt to explain away the footprints as not even fossil footprints, a desperate rescue device. He tried to say that they were just stains in the rock. But decades later, the famous E.D. McKee visited the footprints and called them footprints. He said it's ridiculous to not call them footprints, but he labeled them as an unidentified vertebrate animal, or just an animal with 4 legs. Native Americans specifically told them these are horse tracks and they belong to that animal. The answer was so glaringly obvious, but you see, evolutionary theory does not permit the glaringly obvious conclusion. Evolutionary theory is not science. It is anti-science, ruling out possibilities and discoveries before they are even made, and anything that is contradictory to it. These horse fossil footprints rule out the anti-science theology, which is evolutionism. So in closing, horses supposedly evolved around 50 to 60 million years ago, yet we find horse tracks deeper than we do dinosaur tracks in the geologic column in the Grand Canyon. But it gets better. The Doheny expedition also documented the fascinating petroglyph of what they even labeled as a dinosaur. Hubbard commented that the photograph of the dinosaur petroglyph had been shown to a scientist of report, who then remarked, "It is not a dinosaur. It is impossible because we know that dinosaurs were extinct 12 million years before man appeared on the earth." Gotta love how they know it's a fact, even though the very date that they quote in this is so far off by any evolutionist standard today. Now, they tell people they know that dinosaurs became extinct 65 million years ago. Then when that date changes, the new one will be a fact. How about some biological evidence? We have this as well. Let's take a look at the L, M, and M haplogroups. These directly correlate with Noah's 3 sons that were on the ark. You see, if evolution were true, we would have a plethora of different haplogroups in the diversity of humans today, not just 3. This is evident when we look back in time at ancient man. We see tons of different haplogroups, but yet after the flood bottleneck, we only find 3. Why is that? It's obvious. all humans today derive from the 3 sons of Noah, and genetics proves it today. But it goes much further than just this. There's evidence everywhere. If Noah's Ark is true, and the Ark landed on the mountains of Ararat, and the people from it spread, then Ham's line went to Africa, which has always had the fastest birth rates. Half the women give birth before the age of 18, even today. And because of this, we can make predictions based on their mitochondrial DNA. We're going to find out that young Earth creationism is proven right yet again. Now, how about some of the typical complaints from the skeptic? Such as, what did Noah feed the animals on the ark? Where did they all go to the bathroom? Obviously, this would be a huge problem, would it not? Well, not really. The answer to this is quite simple, especially when we look at cold regions of the world like Sweden, where 7 months out of the year, it's so cold that the animals move under people's homes just to stay warm. To combat this, people are trying to keep them out, but it's nearly impossible, so people eventually just start spreading out a thin layer of wood shavings and peat moss with straw. It's called deep litter. It works by absorbing waste for up to 2 years, requiring no cleanup whatsoever, and it also absorbs smell. One of the reasons why it works so good is by not removing the waste, good microbes come and make their homes in the litter, and these microbes actually eat and break down the feces and consume unhealthy bacteria, leaving good bacteria behind. As for the animals and eating, well, remember, these are small animals. They're very young, and they have to be, because how else could they repopulate the earth if they're old? They might not even want to reproduce. So having very young, small animals on a ship would require not very much food. Also consider, nearly all animals can fall into a hibernation state to survive extreme colds or famines. A lot of things that you've seen in this video are genuine sequences of reversals of the evolutionary timescale. They invalidate it. And these reversals of alleged time demonstrate that there is no deep time. If there is no deep time, then there is no evolution. So if the geological record actually shows clearly the flood of Noah, and if evolution is wrong about that, and the Bible is right about that, then what else is the Bible right about? You see, Jesus talked about the worldwide flood as a fact. And in fact, he cited the flood as a judgment from God, and warned that in the last days it would be the same way before the coming. And in the last days there would be a final warning, exactly the same as it was with Noah. For 120 years, Noah warned the people of earth of the judgment to come, and pointed to the ark, which was free salvation from the judgment to come. And Jesus warned us about the judgment to come. And Jesus is that salvation, and that kingdom is coming in the clouds, and every eye shall see it, and it will be too late, just as it was in the days of Noah, as the ark was sealed.
In 2014, a group of master students at Leicester University decided to settle the question. They used the biblical measurements to calculate the size of the ark. Then they used the density of the water to figure buoyancy, and from there determined how much weight the ship could endure before sinking. Their conclusion? Noah could have put 70,000 animals on board and the ship would have floated.